Gigantic, two absolute shockers. Also, Bitcoin is back over. The US dollar. Let's fucking go, it's happening. China might have gotten ahead of Donald Trump and now created a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The Forbes article states that China has a crucial warning for 2025, and it's expected that the Bitcoin price will explode in 2021. Says that there's a massive leak here. Let's take a look at that. Also, there's massive news in Canada, as President Trudeau is rumored to be stepping down. And now Pierre Poilievre could become the new Bitcoin president. Pierre Poilievre is an ultra-Bitcoin maxi who has already announced plans to introduce a strategic Bitcoin reserve. This is super explosive because we now have two countries that could really drive the Bitcoin price massively up. We're definitely going to check this out because what's happening here is really crazy. First, let's take a look at Canada. Here's Justin Trudeau, who is really known for his socialist experiments, now on the verge of giving up. In El Salvador, many Canadians are fleeing due to dissatisfaction with Canada's situation. The country is suffering from poor regulations, driving it into the ground. This socialist experiment might be ending. If Justin Trudeau steps down, Canadian Bitcoin miners could greatly benefit. And now it could be that this socialist experiment is coming to an end. It says here that if Justin Trudeau steps down, Canadian Bitcoin miners would benefit enormously from it. Pierre Poilievre, his likely successor, has talked about a strategic Bitcoin reserve and is very pro-Bitcoin. Recently, he spoke about funding data centers and lowering energy costs in Canada so that Bitcoin miners can benefit more. Pierre Poilievre is also well known from many clips from 2022 and 2023, where he really pushed for Bitcoin proactively. Recently, he talked about funding data centers and lowering energy costs in Canada so that Bitcoin miners can benefit more. Pierre Poilievre is also well known from a ton of clips from 2022 and 2023, where he really pushed for Bitcoin proactively. Now things have quieted down a bit around him, but it could get louder again if Pierre Poilievre comes back into the spotlight. There are a ton of famous clips of him where he, for example, explaining inflation, clarifying real and good money. He understands Bitcoin and money. He and his wife listen to Bitcoin podcasts at night, so he not only understands Bitcoin, he also gets what money is. He also says about himself that at night, he and his wife always listen to Bitcoin podcasts, like the ones from Michael Saylor and so on. So really a very, very crazy guy who definitely understands Bitcoin here. And this could really have a massive impact if Pierre Poilievre has a say here in Canada and can push through a Bitcoin strategy reserve, because Canada is already a very relevant country worldwide. And check this out, Justin Trudeau, what he had planned 2 or 3 years ago, around 2022 or 2023, when he released this clip where he talked about Bitcoin. See what he said about Bitcoin and note where Bitcoin stands right now. We'll connect that to why the situation in Canada is so explosive at the moment. Check out what he said about Bitcoin and then pay close attention to where Bitcoin stands right now. We'll tie that into the current events, and I'll also explain to you why this situation in Canada is so explosive at the moment.
Mr. Poilievre, so aside from having a plan to get people riled up and to amplify and reflect that anger back, we haven't really seen a lot of solid proposals from Mr. Poilievre. I mean, he did make one. He did make one. That's not fair, you're right. He had one great opportunity for people to escape inflation. He recommended this last spring. You can escape inflation if you invest your money in Bitcoin. Yeah, no. He stayed up late, watched all kinds of YouTube videos, and came to that conclusion. He said that himself, buy Bitcoin to opt out of inflation. Well, any Canadian who actually listened to, maybe that's why those guys with the flags are so mad at me. Any Canadian who listened to him would have lost more than half their life savings since last March. That's not responsible leadership, ausend.
Justin Trudeau is clearly making fun of Pierre Poilievre when he suggested 2 years ago that Canadians should buy Bitcoin here. One should really go all in on Bitcoin to escape inflation because Bitcoin is limited. Justin Trudeau didn't listen to him. He fell for the Maurice Hofchen mistake of looking at things on a short time frame. So it looks like Bitcoin just had a little pullback and has corrected by 50%. Then Justin Trudeau makes fun of Pierre Poilievre. But he who laughs last laughs best. This clip was somehow shot here at US dollars. Now Bitcoin is here at just under US dollars. See who laughs now? The strength of Poilievre, who isn't holding back, attacking the status quo and saying, buy Bitcoin. If you don't buy Bitcoin, you'll lose to inflation. Jerp Oliver notes how Justin Trudeau is inflating by devaluing the Canadian dollar through socialist spending, inflating money endlessly. If you don't buy Bitcoin, then you're going to be a huge loser when it comes to inflation. Jerp Oliver also always points out how Justin Trudeau is systematically creating inflation here by devaluing the Canadian dollar. Simply through socialist spending that is completely out of control, the money is basically being inflated endlessly. That's why he says, buy Bitcoin, folks, buy Bitcoin. And if you want to buy Bitcoin, I'll drop a link below to 21 Bitcoin, the easiest way to buy Bitcoin in Europe. Here you can easily and simply buy Bitcoin, set up savings plans, and place auto wallet transfer limit orders. Super simple, super easy, whether you're a beginner or advanced. And then you can follow Pierre Poilievre's advice and not be as foolish as Justin Trudeau, saving all your money in fiat currency. This is obviously not an investment tip. In the end, they're just two politicians. One person says, hey, Bitcoin is such crap, and the other person says, hey, you buy Bitcoin, we'll even create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And that is more bullish than you can imagine. And that's why, if this happens, if Justin Trudeau really steps down and Pierre Poilievre takes over, then it would be huge, not just for Bitcoin, but probably for Canada, for people's freedom, and for a better life. Then maybe we won't see as many economic refugees coming to El Salvador anymore. Because let me tell you, the two main groups you see here are basically people coming from Europe and the others coming from Canada. And things just aren't going so well over there. There are a few people from the US too, but it really seems like things aren't running smoothly in Canada and Europe. And things just aren't really going well. Then there are a few people from the US, but in Canada and Europe, things really seem to be going off the rails. And that's why people are coming, for example. Countries like El Salvador, it could be other countries too, but they definitely want to get out of Canada and the EU. And then we have an ultra-sensitive report from the Forbes article. It says here, leak reveals Series China 2025 warning predicted to blow up the Bitcoin price. So what this means is wild speculation that China might get ahead of Donald Trump and the US by creating a Bitcoin reserve. It's happening, Vivek is sharing this on X, and it's going pretty viral, just like all of his posts. He has a really large reach. So let's take a look at the Forbes article here, because it clearly states that China is going to get ahead of the US, and there's also a massive warning from China that could cause the Bitcoin price to explode. The warning from China is similar to what I discussed about China's potential collapse. Government bonds have suffered, with interest rates dropping due to poor stock markets, prompting a shift from stocks to bonds. Stimulus packages and quantitative easing QE are happening. Bond interest rates suggest QE is happening. These could be from market shifts, investor speculation, or central banks buying their own bonds to stimulate the economy. The economy is struggling due to the inflated real estate market in China. If the real estate bubble bursts, many will lose their safety net. China might inject more money into the economy if not for the strong dollar, as currency devaluation could reduce competitiveness. The interest rates on bonds would suggest that QE is taking place here, because when bond interest rates go down, that means that bonds are being bought on a massive scale. They are either being bought from the stock market through a transfer, or because investors are speculating on interest rates, or simply because central banks are essentially buying up their own government bonds because no one else is buying and they want to stimulate the economy. But we need to be careful here, because the article I opened goes through various points about why the economy is doing so poorly. Of course, there's also the real estate market, which is massively inflated in China. We have to keep the real estate bubble going, because if the real estate market collapses, a lot of people will have no safety net, no retirement. Many people are buying properties on credit that don't even really exist. They're just castles in the air that people are investing in. That's ultimately the dangerous part, and it's a bubble that's about to burst. China would probably stimulate even more. They would likely pump even more money into the economy if it weren't for the strength of the dollar. The problem is, if the Chinese currency devalues too much against the dollar, they face the issue of losing competitiveness with other nations like the US and so on. Then imports become too expensive, and conversely, they get too little for their exports. So those are basically the two problems that China is facing. With the USA and so on, then the imports are too expensive, and the other way around, you get too little for the exports. Those are basically the two problems that China is facing. But we need to be extremely careful here, because Vivek is strongly implying that this warning in Forbes, and also the so-called leak, whatever you want to call it, the leak reveals Series China 2025 warning. The leak and the prediction made by Forbes in the article that the Bitcoin price is going to explode isn't based on a strategic Bitcoin reserve in any way, in any form. It's basically just being thrown into the article. So they're basically just throwing in this idea that, okay, they're issuing a warning, the economy is heading for a crash, and now we need to strengthen our economy or our currency through Bitcoin. But those are basically things that have been interpreted by people like, for example, interpreted by Vivek. I read through the whole Forbes article, and there was nothing about a Bitcoin reserve. Maybe I just didn't see everything because there was something behind a paywall or something like that. In any case, I didn't see that because in the end, they are two different warnings or two different messages. First of all, a Bitcoin reserve has nothing to do with the 2001 Chinese economy, but of course, there is always speculation that China is building up a strategic Bitcoin reserve in the background, because of course they are not stupid either. And there are always rumors that the China mining ban was just a pretext to exclude the population from Bitcoin so that they can buy Bitcoin themselves under a false flag operation. These rumors and speculations are always around, but we don't have any confirmations on that. That's basically just the interpretation of various Bitcoin folks, from 2021 who are reading that into the article. Additionally, one must also say that the Forbes articles are, let's say, not the truth per se. Anyone can write a Forbes article just because they say so. But I can totally understand the warning about China, that the economy is on the verge of collapse. I'm on board with that, and if the economy does collapse, it will definitely push Bitcoin prices up because sooner or later, they'll have to resort to quantitative easing. But they're trying to hold off on that for as long as possible to avoid devaluing the Chinese currency too much against the dollar. But just imagine, if the central banks in the US lower interest rates even more and the dollar keeps weakening, then China will start printing money like crazy. That means that's the exciting thing now. If Jerome Powell opens the money floodgates, then other nations will also open the money floodgates further because they are just waiting like vultures for the USA to finally open the money floodgates properly, and then China will print money here without end. In 2021, that's going to send Bitcoin to the moon. It's going to trigger the absolute Jim Cramer candle that will really catapult Bitcoin massively upward. And I actually found a really crazy clip from a Terra hashtag featuring a super wild Bitcoin pro. Check out what he has to say. It's super explosive. Check out what he has to say. Highly explosive. Bitcoin is about awareness. Many think we need inflation, fear deflation, and it is not an intelligence test, it is an ego test. Using. A lot of people are so stuck in their thought patterns, thinking we need 2% inflation, that we'll all die in deflation, and that we need central banks. If we don't have a flexible money supply, the economic system just won't work. There are so many belief systems and thought patterns, and the more intellectual someone is, often the harder it is to understand Bitcoin, especially if they're trapped in the academic system. And other people who might not be so trapped in logic but have a good gut feeling, a well-developed intuition, can often automatically recognize, hey, there's something here that isn't against us. Rather, it's something that can help everyday people regain their own power. Very, very important message. Think about it. Bitcoin isn't about intelligence. It's about awareness. I'm going to drop a link below for a TREZOR hardware wallet, where you can easily store and manage your Bitcoin without the third-party risk you have on an exchange with an ETF or at a bank. This way, you're protected from hackers or other attacks thanks to the hardware wallet. Anyone who's seriously getting into Bitcoin should really consider securing a hardware wallet and pulling their Bitcoin off the exchanges. In 2021, you can still get up to 10% off on a TREZOR hardware wallet with the code BitcoinHotel. That's a solid recommendation. Now let me know what you think about the massive events happening here in Canada and in China. Until then, peace out.